Please open your Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 17. 1 Samuel chapter 17. Once you get there, see if you are familiar with the story in this chapter. 1 Samuel 17. Quick show of hands. Who here knows the story of David and Goliath? Pretty much everybody, yeah. I think for about a year now I've been wanting to preach on this story. There are two basic themes to the story of David and Goliath. One of them is honor and the other one is courage. And as a young man, if you hear that a story is about honor and courage, oorah, let's go. It's a cool story. And it appeals to that side. What are the characters of this story? There are about 4 characters in all in this story. Obviously, there's David and Goliath. That's what the story is called, after all. You can think of King Saul as another character in the story. But there's one more. Maybe you don't know off the top of your head. And that's Eliab. Eliab is David's older brother. And we'll talk about him when we get to him. It's only about 4 characters, and it's a pretty simple story, so no wonder we're told it very often growing up when we're in Bible class, or even if you have one of those children's Bibles that are illustrated. This is normally included in those Bibles because it's a very fun story. It's very visual. Do you know what courage means? Do you know what it means to be brave? What is courage? Well, I think we understand. We use that word a lot. To be brave, courageous. It isn't necessarily not being afraid of something. Courage is being maybe afraid of something, or in a scenario that makes you afraid, that scares you. But you choose to do the right thing anyway. You choose to do the scary thing because you have a good reason. That's what courage is. What about honor? What is honor? Well, honor is a pretty broad word, actually. But when you're talking about honor, a lot of times you're talking about your reputation. You're talking about your name, how it is esteemed, how it is looked at. Honor also has regard for what is right and what is just. When I say the words courage and honor, try to imagine some kind of illustration, some kind of scene, some characters in your mind that as best as you can perfectly fit those words. What do you imagine when you hear courage and honor? What do you think? Well, for me, it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe some kind of knight in full metal armor. He's got a sword. He's maybe got a horse. There's a dragon in the background, a castle, and he's ready to slay the dragon and save the princess. That would be a good picture of courage and honor, right? Or if you're a Lord of the Rings buff like me, I was watching Lord of the Rings the other day. Maybe you're imagining like a character like Aragorn, right? And mysterious, but he's got a sword and he's rallying armies to fight the forces of Sauron, the forces of Mordor. And maybe it's too nerdy for you guys. That isn't typically, though, the way that courage looks for us. And the point that I'm going to make and really circle around to back at the end of this lesson, courage is not fun. If you are in a situation where you have to be courageous, where you have to be brave, chances are in that situation you are not having a good time. If you have to be courageous, then you are scared by the very definition of the word. And so we like to imagine this picturesque, like this knight with his shining sword and shield. And it looks cool. Courage looks cool. And maybe from the outside, when other people are courageous, it looks cool. But when you're living it, courage stinks. It isn't fun, and it isn't cool. Courage feels sick to your stomach. It feels shaky, trembly, nauseous. It's none of that fantasized glory. It's none of that. The story of David and Goliath has a lot to say about it. Starting off in chapter 17, you have the idea in verse 1, the Philistines gathered their armies for battle. They were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah, and they camped between Soko and Azekah, and Ephes Damim. Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up in battle array to encounter the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on the mountain on one side, while Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, with the valley between them. So use your imaginations, right? There's a great scene. You have two mountains, and there's this valley between them. Philistines on one side, Israel on the other side. They're staring at each other. They've all got their swords. They've got their soldiers ready. They're ready to go to war. All right? And the Philistines are age-old enemies of Israel. An outcome comes from the ranks of the Philistines a man, if you can call him that. In verse 4, a champion came out from the armies of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. Most people agree about 9 feet 9 inches. The typical height of a basketball player, NBA, would be about 6 feet 7 inches, somewhere around there. 9 feet 9 inches. What was he wearing? He had a bronze helmet on his head. He was clothed with scale armor, which weighed 5,000 shekels of bronze. Some people say his breastplate alone would weigh about 125 pounds. That's the size of a child. That's the weight of I don't know, like a 12-year-old, somewhere around there. He had bronze greaves on his legs and a bronze javelin slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the head of his spear weighed 600 shekels of iron. And this shield carrier also walked before him. He stood and he shouted to the ranks of Israel and said to them, "Why do you come out to draw up in battle array? Am I not the Philistine, and you, servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will become your servants. And if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall become our servants and serve us." Again the Philistines said, "I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." Philistine issues his challenge. We don't need to go to war. We don't need to have all this bloodshed. Just send me somebody you think can take me on, and we'll fight, and it'll be decided between us who wins or who loses today. Of course, as you could imagine, Israel is looking at this monstrosity of a man with all of his armor, all of his weapons. Verse 11, it says, when Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Remember our themes. They were dismayed and greatly afraid. And of course, who wouldn't be? So as this Philistine is coming out day after day, it says, he's issuing this same challenge to Israel. Somebody come fight me. And could you imagine being a soldier in that army, and day after day, this Philistine comes and he issues his same challenge, and nobody is rising up to the fight. It says in verse 16, he came forward morning and evening for 40 days and took his stand. And eventually, David enters the scene. And David has been sent by his father to go check on his brothers who are in the army. They're camped there in front of the Philistines on the mountain. David comes, and he sees this Philistine. The Philistine walks forward while David is there with his brothers in the army. It says in verse 24, when all the men of Israel saw the man, that is Goliath, they fled from him and were greatly afraid. Then the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who is coming up? Surely he is coming up to defy Israel, and it will be that the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches, will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. Then David spoke to the men who were standing by him, saying, what will be done for the man who kills the Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should taunt the armies of the living God? The people answered him in accord with this word, saying, thus it will be done for the man who kills him. See, David is not content to see Goliath challenge the armies of the living God. And that's the challenge that David is seeing here. It's not an affront to just Israel. It's an affront to God's honor. David is asking, what are we doing here? Why has this not been dealt with? And Eliab's response in verse 28 goes like this. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men. And Eliab's anger burned against David. And he said, why have you come down? With whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your insolence and the wickedness of your heart, for you have come down in order to see the battle. Okay, big brother Eliab. What do you think caused Eliab to say this, by the way? Maybe some amount of hurt ego. He's been here with the soldiers, and everybody's been terrified out of their mind. Nobody is going to challenge this giant. And here comes Pipsqueak David, pretty boy. He's just a youth. He's just a little kid. And he's saying, why aren't we doing anything about it? And Eliab says, I see the insolence of your heart. You're wicked. He retaliates because his pride has been hurt. He accuses David of wanting his own honor. He accuses David of just looking out for himself or maybe saying empty words. David says in verse 29, "What have I done now? Was it not just a question?" Turned away from him to another and said the same thing, and the people answered the same thing as before. David is trying to find somebody, some kind of soldier, that's willing to go and fight Goliath. And nobody is willing. Then David goes to Saul directly. David says to Saul in verse 32, "Let no man's heart fail on account of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." Saul said to David, "You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you're but a youth, while he has been a warrior from his youth." David probably had a pretty good amount of respect for Saul at this point. I mean, Saul was the king of Israel. He was God's anointed. How would you feel if you were David and you came up to King Saul? "I'll take this guy on. I'll do it if nobody else will." And Saul answers, "You can't do that. No way." Probably pretty discouraged. That probably wouldn't feel too good. David says, "Your servant was tending his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went out after him and attacked him and rescued it from his mouth. And when he rose up against me, I seized him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. And the uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, since he has taunted the armies of the living God." And there it is again. David is seeing his past experiences as a shepherd with a lion and a bear that he has overcome insurmountable odds before. David has been practicing courage even before the day with Goliath. He says, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion, from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." And Saul gives in. He says, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Saul then tries to give David his armor, the king's own armor. And David tries to walk around in it. He says, "I haven't tested these. I can't go with these." And so he refuses the armor. And he takes with him his sling and his stick, and he picks up some rocks, and he puts them in his pocket. And he approaches the Philistine. In verse 41 it says, "The Philistine came on and approached David with the shield bearer in front of him. And when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy with a handsome appearance. And the Philistine said to David, 'Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?' And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine also said to David, 'Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field.' And then David said to the Philistine, 'You come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of armies, whom you have taunted.'" David's response is really, really cool. "I come to you in the name of the hosts, of the Lord of hosts, and I'm going to cut your head off today." "I'm going to defeat you so that you may know, that the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not deliver by sword or spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." Then it happened that the Philistine arose, and he came, and he drew near to meet David. What does David do? Get up slowly? Trudge toward Goliath? No, it says, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. David full sends it. straight to Goliath. David ran and he put his hand into his bag. He took a stone and he slung it, struck the Philistine on his forehead. And the stone sank into his forehead so that he fell on his face to the ground. Thus David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. He struck the Philistine and killed him. There was no sword in David's hand. And David ran and stood over the Philistine. He took his sword and drew it out of its sheath and killed him and cut off his head with it. Then when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. The men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines as far as the valley to the gates of Ekron. And the slain Philistines lay among the way to Sharim, even to Gath and Ekron. And that's your story, David and Goliath. All of David's actions throughout this story was motivated by an interest in the honor of God's name and in the defense of his people. It was God's name that David was concerned about. There's something about young men. Much of a young man's life is spent in the pursuit of honor. It's just the way it is. When you're a young man and you're told to go out to make some kind of life for yourself, you don't have anything. You don't have anything. You might have a dad or an uncle, cousins who have accumulated some kind of life for themselves. They've got cars, they've got a house, they've got a family, they've got things that they're taking care of. But as a young man, you don't. And the choice that a young man has to go about, or has to make, is how is he going to go about pursuing honor for himself? What is he going to do? Unfortunately, a lot of young men think the way to gain honor for themselves is by pushing others down. And that's where we get the competitive spirit, isn't it? Everything is a contest. If you can prove that you're better than the other guy, then you win, I guess. You're a better man. David teaches us not to seek our own honor, but to value God's honor. For most young men, it takes a while to figure out that it isn't our own honor that's worth seeking. Only God's. And Eliab accused David of looking out for himself. That wasn't what David was doing at all. David was protecting God's honor. And did you know that we are called to do the same thing? In 1 Peter chapter 3. In 1 Peter 3, starting in verse 13, Peter writes, "Who is there to harm you if you prove zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for the sake of righteousness, you are blessed. And do not fear their intimidation, and do not be troubled. But sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence. And keep a good conscience, so that in the thing in which you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ will be put to shame. For it is better, if God should will it so, that you suffer for doing what is right rather than for doing what is wrong. We have those elements of courage and honor in the commands that Peter gives, right? Always be ready to make a defense to the hope that is in you with gentleness and reverence. Don't fear the intimidation of the world around you. We understand that. There are constant attacks on God's honor that is being made today in all sorts of different ways. We don't have physical Goliath standing outside and challenging the armies of Israel. There's none of that. We do have people who constantly use the name of God in a flippant way to just use it as a reaction all the time. Isn't it a shame that we get used to it sometimes? We don't even hear it anymore when people say, "Oh my God," as a reaction to something. And beyond that, people slander the Lord. They defame Him. A common problem that is brought forth by pretty much everyone that I meet is that they might be willing to admit that there's a God, but they would say that if there's a God, He's not good. That is an affront to God's honor. That is an attack on His character. Be ready to give a defense. But in order to give a defense, we need courage. It takes courage to stand up and to fight for what is right. It takes courage to say that people are wrong whenever they bring these assumptions, these charges against God. And what does David teach us about being courageous here? David was courageous, but not because he had a lot of people rooting for him. Not at all. Big brother Eliab. I mean, if there was a place where you expected David to be encouraged, for somebody to take his side, for somebody to come right beside him and hold his hands up and to encourage him that, yeah, this is wrong, you'd expect it to be David's own brother. Someone he knew, someone he grew up with. And he wasn't met with encouragement from Eliab. He was rebuked. He was shamed even by Eliab. Yeah, I think this is something. Oftentimes it's the place where you should expect encouragement. The place where encouragement should be coming from. That is often, or can often be, the most discouraging. People who should be building you up sometimes fail to do that. And they tear you down instead. That's the way it goes. But that shouldn't stop us trying to do what's right. Jesus experienced discouragement from people that were close to Him. You should probably think about Judas, one of the 12 that betrayed Him. Or maybe you think about Peter. As Jesus was on trial, as He was being mocked and as He was being beaten, Peter denying Jesus and that he was ever affiliated with Jesus. Courage does not feel very cool. If you're going to look at a good picture of courage, I think Jesus would be just about the perfect picture. I don't know if he was ever really nervous whenever he was teaching large crowds. Maybe he was. Maybe he was nervous when he was teaching. Maybe he was nervous whenever he was contradicting or refuting the Pharisees, very people that he knew wanted him dead. Maybe he... Well, we know for certain, and we talked about this, and as Josh led our minds with the Lord's table, he was nervous when he was in the garden, as he was sweating like drops of blood. And you can only imagine what that felt like for Jesus. And even though he felt that fear, that anxiety weighing on him, he went through with everything anyway. He let Judas find him in the garden. He let himself be carried away. I had Brent read John chapter 3, 19 through 21 for me. To read it again, to refresh your minds, this is Jesus speaking. He says, "This is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men love the darkness rather than the light, for their deeds were evil. For everyone who does evil hates the light, and does not come to the light for fear that his deeds will be exposed. But he who practices the truth comes to the light, so that his deeds may be manifested as having been wrought in God." It is a true statement that the best things in life take the most courage to do. The best things in life take the most courage to do. And Jesus said, "Those who are in the darkness don't come to the light." Why? Because they're afraid. For fear that their deeds may be exposed. Think about that for a sec. I was invited to give a small talk to a young people study in Dayton recently, and I was asked to speak on this story, David and Goliath, on courage. And I asked everybody who knew the story of David and Goliath. Everybody's hands shot up. And then I asked everybody, all right, who would be willing to tell me the story of David and Goliath right now? There was one hand that shot up. I was pretty surprised. Everybody knew the story. Everybody probably could have told me the story of David and Goliath. You know why they didn't raise their hands when I asked them the second question? Whether they'd be able to tell it to me right now. Because they're afraid. They're scaredy cats. And we are all scaredy cats. That's just the way it goes. But there comes a time in your life where you got to get over it. And there are a few things scarier than admitting your sin. There are a few things scarier than owning up to the damage that you've done and how shameful that is and how wrong it is. And those who are in darkness don't want to do it. And they stay scaredy cats. And they don't come to the light. They don't want people to know that. It takes courage to own up to it. He who practices the truth comes to the light, so that his deeds may be manifested as having been wrought in God. Now I give you the invitation. Are you going to be of the darkness, or are you going to be of the light? It's just about courage. Don't let fear, don't let intimidation get in the way of you making your soul right with God. That opportunity is ready for you if you're not a Christian, or if you are a Christian and you need help and you need prayers. Then you can come forward as we stand and sing the invitation song.
To Christ